community partners, our development partners, our diplomatic members, our members from regional CSO networks, especially Lente, NAMFREL, PPCRV. We also thank media for taking out time for this. And of course, the mission management team, all the observers of ANFREL, as well as the assistants and the support staff. Thank you so much. I'll just quickly start with my own introduction, and then I'll take you through introduction of the panel. Rana. I work as Senior Program Officer with ANFREL, mainly responsible for their international election observation missions. In this mission in Philippines, I served as the mission coordinator for EAs, that is our electoral analysts, and international election observers. So we have with us in the panel Mr. Rohana Hetriarchi. He is ANFREL's chairperson. For this mission, he served as the head of the mission. We have with us Ms. Priza
I think one of the main area which I wanted to highlight or emphasize equal playing field. There are a couple of disturbing factors on that area. Number one, I think Rana just mentioned the vote buying. I think it's public secret now. So everybody knows it is happening across the country, not only these elections, even in the previous elections. It's a well-known factor that has to be addressed, because otherwise it will undue advantage the people, the candidate, those who have financial power. So somehow, if we maintain equal playing field, we need to address this issue. Vote buying and vote selling, the both. And also the misuse of the public resources, and maybe the power also. That also observed throughout the process in many ways. The government resources being used and taken the advantage for some candidate. I think that is the duty of the COMLEC, that they need to address this issue. And implementation of campaign finance, the ceiling. I think the law has been there for decades now, but the implementations part is lacking, or there are rooms to improve on that. It is not easy, and it is not only Philippines. The campaign ceiling, the monitoring mechanism, establishing monitoring mechanism is not an easy task. But if you are not addressing that, it will damage the integrity of the elections. So I think those areas where the COMLEC has to be seriously looked at. And on the polling day, it's largely order and they organize, but there are certain areas still need to consider. In our opinion, secrecy of ballot, it may be not big issue in a local contest, but when it's come to the international standard, the secrecy of ballot was not seriously looked at. The COMLEC has taken certain steps, but on the ground, we have seen that it was not managed properly. And queue control also, the inside the polling promises were properly managed, but outside, I think we need to have an extra effort, or we need to increase maybe some polling officials for the future to manage that. And also disinformations and misinformations also one of the factor which we observe. I think those things will elaborate my colleagues, members. But finally, I wish to say that ANFREL is willing to engage with Philippines, engage with COMLEC through our membership in the future, because we believe as ANFREL, the international experts, international experience will make differences and will strengthen the democracy of the countries. So that is, we have been experiencing in last 2.5 decades with our involvement, with our recommendations, not only ANFREL actually, the international observers engagement, there are a lot of countries has improved in a big way. I think Philippines also one of the example. So with that, I hand over mic again to Rana.
Thank you so much, Chair, for taking us through the key highlights or the main statement of our mission. I now invite all our panelists to dive deeper into some of the important key areas. So, to start with, we have Jake Parker, who's going to discuss transparency in detail.
Thanks. So I'd like to highlight some of our findings around the administration of the election by COMELEC and around the transparency there. Thanks. So in general, from the stakeholders that we spoke to, COMELEC, especially under new administration and new leadership of COMELEC since the 2022 elections, was seen as positively engaging in a professional way with civil society, with stakeholders, with the media, and with political parties, which has seen a more consistent and strategic approach. ANFREL observing the elections here in the Philippines in 2022, and one of our recommendations at that time was to mention that COMELEC should be more accessible and communicative. So this really shows growth even in the few years since we have been here. And it also shows a growing institutional commitment to inclusion from COMELEC as well. And I'm sure we will also go into more detail on the inclusivity and the accessibility, in particular on election day. But nonetheless, some of the new initiatives that COMELEC has come up with, especially for this election, should be highlighted and are positive in our view. With the electoral framework, in some cases being quite old, the Omnibus Election Code is almost 40 years old, almost exactly 40 years old at this stage. It has some gaps, and COMELEC was seen to be positively filling those
in their efforts, a lot more compared to the previous elections. In fact, they had a dedicated vulnerable sectors office this time, and we believe it's a very good initiative. They reached out to different civil society members as well as different organizations which are working on inclusivity, and they really made some positive efforts this time to make the elections more inclusive. They included lots of sectoral stakeholders as well. So this is something which was quite positive takeaway from this election. Looking at some of the accessibility measures of COMLEC, I think this is something which is continued. And in fact, I should say it is something which is improved from one election to another. The priority polling places, the PPPs, satellite PPPs, then accessible polling places, that is APP, for senior citizens, persons with disability, and pregnant voters. So they really made some positive efforts to make the elections inclusive, and they really worked hard to allow these special or like vulnerable sectors to be part of this franchise. But of course, there were some challenges as well. Other than that, there were also special polling places for persons who are deprived of liberty. And I also must highlight that our observers were also able to not just observe or monitor the regular polling places, but we also included in our observation all these special or priority or accessible polling stations as well. So we other than that, I think another highlight, and in fact, this is one of the innovations and one of the additions. This was the first time where the early voting was implemented throughout the country, 5 to 7 a.m. Honestly, I was a little apprehensive. I thought 5 a.m. might be too early, but I was actually surprised, and it was a good surprise to see so many voters already gathered up, queuing up at the voting centers. So this was definitely positive. But talking about negative, I think the crowd management could have been better. I think there was some communication gaps and some information lapse, and this 5 to 7 window could have better utilized. But so we obviously have lots of scope for improvements as well. But again, talking about inclusivity, I think it's also important to highlight civil society engagement. Again, Philippines has one of the most active and vibrant CSO group, and this is one of the key takeaways for us as well. In fact, they not just participated on the election day, but they kind of assisted COMLEC. They were also providing voter education and trying to improve awareness and knowledge of the voters as well. So they played a very important role in that. On the election day, they were part of the monitoring exercise or the observation exercise. And I must also highlight post-election audits, including the random manual audit, RMA, and CSOs are also quite active in that. So this is another factor which I would say, make the election inclusive and one of the positive takeaways. But then again, there are some challenges, and this is something which was there in the earlier elections as well. But I think there is still lots of confusion. Like the chair also mentioned, there was lots of confusion, especially about the voting procedures, crowd management. So it was more on the operational part. We just believe that it could have been handled better with better management and better communication. And as a recommendation, I want to share that ANFREL suggests that we must ensure full implementation of accessibility measures across all polling precincts. So it's not just about full implementation, it's also that all the provisions are implemented uniformly and consistently. So there should not be any difference, because we observe the difference as well. So that's it from my side about the continued inclusivity. Now I request our electoral analyst, Nines. She'll take you through, sorry, we have Jake again for focusing on the electoral competition. Then we'll have Nines.
Thanks, Wana. So one thing that was noted by our long-term observers out in the fields was a very high level of seats that went unopposed. At least 30% of the areas that we observed had at least one seat with no opposition, which had an impact on, in some of those areas, on political engagement of voters. Although we have a very high turnout on election day, at a level on the ground with voters, there was some apathy that was seen and resignation even due to those issues. And this is partly, as we noticed, due to endemic issues in terms of the power of entrenched political families and dynastic politics. So looking at some data that you might have seen from PCIJ, Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, they note that 36 out of 54 of the current party list members in this Congress, or in the Congress up until this election, have links to political families, and also note that half of the 156 party list groups standing also have some links to political families. And we noted that this has an effect on the plurality of choice for voters. As I mentioned, it's seen as an endemic issue, and one that there is some resignation towards, despite observing, some areas of hopefulness with challenges to these entrenched powers, and also some candidates who were standing directly in opposition to some of these issues. And really, this has been a case, especially in the party list, since the 2013 High Court ruling. I'm sure everyone is aware of the fact that there is an ongoing discussion around dynastic politics in this country, and it's obviously something that will not necessarily change overnight. But the elections this year in Bangsamoro in October and the Barangay and SK elections in December will be an important test as well of these issues, looking at the Bangsamoro electoral law, which has specific bans on dynasties, and also the SK reform law from 2015, which includes similar provisions. It means that this year, for some of these issues, it'll be really important for COMELEC and also the Congress to really look in depth at the legislation around this and to highlight issues, to learn from elections, and to continue this momentum and this learning in this, I think we called it a super election year for the Philippines. It's pretty unique in that we're going to have 3 elections this year for the Philippines. So plenty of opportunity for learning, and we encourage in this area that people continue to look. And there's great work being done by some of our civil society partners, by PCIJ, but also by Lente, PPCRV, ANFREL, and others. And it's, of course, thanks to them that a lot of this work continues as well. But nonetheless, COMELEC and the Congress should continue to look at this area.
Thank you, Jake. Now we have Khoiranisa Noor Agastiasi, one of our electoral analysts, and she will discuss persistent challenges.
Okay, thank you, Rana. Good morning, everyone. There's also persistent challenges happen during this election, and this challenge actually common challenges that faced by other countries. They are like vote buying and also abuse of state resources. Vote buying and abuse of state resources, actually it not happen only during the campaign period. It happens like long before the election, pre-election, and even after the election, because sometimes it like reward and punishment to the voters. So it's like the candidate who is elected will, okay, I will give you this scholarship because you already vote for me, but this scholarship will not be given to the voters that did not vote for them. So it's like a reward and punishment. And sometimes it's also look normal because it happens long before the election. For example, at the beginning of the budgeting process. So people like it's just normal. It's legalized because long before the election, and sometimes we as election observers sometimes monitor the election only a month or 2 weeks before the election, but it happens long before the election. And we in ANFREL appreciate that COMELEC has initiated a Contra Bigay task force. Previously, Contra Bigay only focused on vote buying, but now COMELEC expand not only for the vote buying, but also to monitor the abuse of state resources as known here as an IUDA. And based on our discussion with the COMELEC mentioned that there's like more than 400 report to the COMELEC about vote buying and abuse of state resources. And COMELEC also has disqualified a candidate that proven to do this violation of law. And it's the challenge make the electoral environment non-equal playing field to the candidates, because the candidate that who is not have the resource cannot do that, and it's become personal politics. It is used state funding. The money is from people tax, for example, but it is personalized by the candidate. It claimed by the candidate. This is like a reward from me as a candidate for the voters. And of this recommendation for this issues, like Chair mentioned, to promote the more transparency campaign finance. And the other important things is also to advocate freedom of information law, to push transparency and accountability of government budgeting process. So we can observe from the very beginning. Thank you, Rana.
Thank you so much, Nenes. Now we have Riza Rosales discussing social media in detail. It was the last. So again, I request Nenes to take us through some of BARM's specific observations.
Okay. We also conducted observation within BARM, Bangsamoro Autonomous Region for Muslim Mindanao, including Kota Batu City, as well as Sultan Kudurat and Datu Odin Sinsuat in Maguindanao del Norte. Sorry if I mistakenly mentioned the name. Yeah. And ANFREL also monitor how COMELEC implementing the key provisions of the Bangsamoro Electoral Code, including related to the accreditation of regional political parties, the allocation of reserved seat, and also the conduct of voter education and information campaigns. Actually, based on the observation by our observer in BARM, there's also some issues happen in BARM, like long queue and also the delay of the polling station. But we note that there is a polling station that began over 2 hours late due to the arrival and the preparation of the electoral board's members, and voters were waiting to cast their ballot until 2 p.m., 9 hours behind the schedule in the precinct under the COMELEC control. So it led to long queues and also voters' frustration, potentially affecting participating in the area already facing high levels of political disengagement. But overall, observers noted that election in BARM was largely consistent with the broader national trends.
Thank you so much, Nenes. So now I request Riza Rosales to take us through some important observations on social media.
Thank you, Rana. Thank you, Nenes, Jake, and thank you, Chair. Yeah, save the best for last. So this is social media monitoring. Can I kindly request the slides, please? Thank you. I have the slides. So this is the first time that ANFREL undertook a very systematic way of monitoring social media since Philippines was tagged as patient zero in 2016. And for this mission, the mission assesses the impact of social media on electoral integrity, specifically in the implementation of COMELEC Resolution number 11064, regulating candidates' online activities, because in the resolution, COMELEC is requiring all those candidates to report out and register their official social media pages to the COMELEC Education and Information Department. So this monitoring is actually an independent and parallel effort on the part of ANFREL in partnership with the Carter Center. So the mission uses a tool, we call it Junkipedia. So it's a monitoring and analysis tool that tracks public content across platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, X, and TikTok. So Junkipedia's advanced features including search filters, keyword and tracking, and data visualization. So actually part of the mission objective is to track also civil society initiatives and platform interventions to combat disinformation, providing real-time insights into social media's influence on voter behavior and electoral integrity. So for this mission, in our preliminary social media monitoring findings, it revealed that the electoral discourse across Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, and YouTube was dominated by personality-driven and event-focused content coming from those official social media pages. From the 317 unique accounts identified, 250 were coded with a 7% randomized sample of over 38,240 posts analyzed in depth. So we see that nearly 80% of the channels we're following have posted at least once. So we coded 2 different actor types, focusing on the national candidates, the senatorial candidates, and the party list. So following more actor types, for example, the media, CSOs, influencers. So it requires identifying those actor types and finding their social media accounts. Okay. Next. Okay. So we sampled from a much larger pool of posts. Each week, Junkipedia systematically harvested and archived thousands of posts, which is shown in blue, the color blue, and only a small fraction has been manually coded by our coders. So that's in red. So the random sampling makes the coding useful because although we code only a small proportion of the posts, doing so randomly allows us to extrapolate the findings to the broader data set. So this approach maintains the integrity of the analysis despite the limited sample size. So as part of the findings, posting activity surged in early May. The highest volume of posts occurred during the week of May 4 to 10, surpassing the previous peak of April 27 to May 3. So this spike aligns with intensified online activity leading to up to and immediately following the election. But late March and so actually the posting activity surged in early May. And next slide. So every day, hundreds of posts were collected and archived daily. Each day, Junkipedia archived hundreds of posts from both candidates and party lists. The candidates are in red, the senatorial candidates, and the party list in blue, with totals ranging from under 100 to over 1,000 per day. So senatorial candidates' content dominated early on. In February and March, more posts were cataloged from senatorial candidate accounts than party list. So party list activity surged in April. Starting in early April, catalog posts from party list increased rapidly, even matching and briefly surpassing senatorial candidates' content in early May. Just like what I mentioned, the peak volume occurred in early May, and both actor types showed a sharp rise in posting, reflecting heightened campaign activity. Next slide. Over the entire period, more senatorial candidate posts we have been coding for the past months, as shown by the trend line. But however, the candidate coded post counts average around 25 to 35 per day, while party list posts range between 5 to 15. Next. Okay, with regard to the type of content, what we've seen from the official social media pages and outside official social media pages. So, surprisingly, democratic content dominates coded posts. So, posts containing democratic themes like civic participation, public dialogue, or policy proposals consistently outnumber undemocratic ones throughout the period. Our second finding is actually undemocratic content is rare. Posts coded as containing undemocratic themes such as the hate speech, disinformation, or the legitimizing claims remain a small share of the sample, but show a slight uptick leading into May. So the visible decline, it's actually surprising from our end given the history of Philippines with regard to combating disinformation and misinformation. Next. Okay. 6 policy teams dominate political messaging. Candidates and senatorial candidates and party lists most often post about the economy. We have gathered 167 posts, public services, rights, democracy, education, and gender issues. So this lead the policy conversation on social media. But looking at it deeply, because we are actually listening every video, coding the post, the messages, this lead the policy conversation on social media. But looking at it deeply, the posts contain shallow to deep conversations. But with regard to the top agenda, actually economic concerns top the agenda. Economic issues such as jobs, inflation, and growth are the most frequently referenced theme by a wide margin. Rights and democracy remain central, and many posts avoid policy altogether. And most content does not address policy themes. Instead, posts focus on campaign appearances, endorsements, personal branding, potentially limiting voter exposure to substantive platforms. With regard to messaging priorities, difference in policy emphasis might relate to whether the actor is an incumbent or it represents a specific region or it belongs to a particular demographic. Okay, next. Just to show you the total posts per campaign-related coding items. So most posts recap campaign events and not policy or civic content. And the most common post type by the candidate, of course, is their campaign events. This typically highlights the rallies, the motorcades that we've seen, or meet and greets often visually rich but light on policy or voter guidance. Endorsements outpace economic or policy messaging. There are more posts about campaign endorsements than about voting, education, or any single policy theme. Voting encouragement exists, but it's not a core focus. Only 104 posts promote voting directly, while even fewer promote voter civic engagement, mentions about democratic participation, and just 4 mention about volunteering, which is probably relevant for citizens observers. And then lastly, civic mobilization posts remain rare but present. The very limited in number, the appearance of volunteer and donation appeals is notable compared to other elections. So this could indicate early moves toward grassroots strategies. With regard to, next slide please, items related to undermining the electoral process. This might be surprising because most election irregularities posts reflect minor real-world concerns. The largest category with 40 posts flag low-level issues like ink bleed-through or long lines, not coordinated, but it is not a coordinated disinformation. These are genuine voter concerns, not necessarily false or malicious. And more serious, the legitimizing the claims are limited but present. A small number of posts directly attack the integrity of the electoral process, criticizing the electoral management body, the COMELEC, national or local, or discredited individuals or parties involved in elections. So this may gain influence if actually widely shared. So there was no evidence also of elite-driven disinformation or incitement. among the coded content that I presented earlier, there were 0 instances of misinformation, disinformation, or incitement to violence by candidates or party lists. This suggests elite actors are largely avoiding overtly harmful rhetoric. And the restraint is notable and encouraging. Political scientists emphasize the power of elite cues in shaping public belief and collective action. And the absence of inflammatory or deceptive posts from the high-profile account is a positive sign for electoral legitimacy. Next. Okay, total posts per information-related coding item. Healthy information sharing was visible and encouraging as well. So we coded 41 posts offering civic education, explaining how the voter works, why it matters, or how to participate, and 42 posts providing general voter information like polling hours or logistics. And some content actively debunks false claims. 6 posts directly responded to or corrected misinformation. Although while limited, this is a welcome sign of proactive defense of electoral integrity. And at the same time, this kind of content support democratic engagement. Next. Okay, this has been one of the areas of focus, and we have seen this, or actually it's not a surprise because we have been seeing it during the campaign period, but very few posts in the dataset mention China. Only a handful of coded posts reference China-related issues during the campaign, indicating limited public messaging on the topic. The South China Sea dispute was the most mentioned issue. There were 9 posts coded referred to maritime sovereignty or territorial claims in the West Philippine Sea, making it the most prominent China-related theme. Other China topics were barely visible, but strategic issues like Taiwan, diaspora, or Chinese aid were not addressed. So no posts in the sample touch on Taiwan, China's economic influence, or the Chinese Filipino community, despite their geopolitical significance. Okay, my last slide, actually, of course, COMELEC introduced the new digital campaign regulations in response to this dynamics and collaborated with a lot of civil society organizations and tech platforms, of course, but however, ANFREL observed that enforcement remains uneven. Actually, it is a call for the COMELEC Task Force KKK to strengthen their monitoring efforts and calls for a systematic review and strengthening of these policies. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Breeza. Also a polite reminder that, we have also given a QR code which you can scan in the executive summary document that you have. This will take you to the entire interim report. So I think now we can have Q&A if you have any questions to the panelists. So we would like to invite all of you. Sure.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Nikki from the Norwegian Embassy. My question is on the political parties. How have you engaged them, and what sort of exchanges or information sharing was available? Are there also recommendations towards reforming political parties so that they become beyond campaign machineries themselves, like having actual checks and balances and accountability measures built into the parties themselves? And this question is coming from the point you mentioned earlier on dynasties and that conversation. Thanks.
I think I would guide this question to Jake. Yeah.
Thank you. So on your points in particular, we interviewed as many representatives of political parties as we could, ensuring that also we got a good spread between senators, House representatives, and local representatives, given the scale of this election with the 18,000 plus seats. sometimes we would accompany them on campaign, not accompany them. We would speak to them during a campaign events door to door, because the candidates were incredibly busy at this time. So we faced. It was about finding the candidates and where we could. We were a core team here in Manila, so we also engaged political parties in this area and candidates, but also we encouraged our long-term observers out in the field to speak to those. So they spoke to mayors, they spoke to other people standing for other seats, and we also attended the political rallies of the candidates as well to get a sense as to the campaign platforms. You're right in that political parties are personalities come before political parties in the current context of the Philippines. So that's obviously a challenge when engaging those parties. We tried as much as we could to speak to not just the candidates themselves, but also to the wider party infrastructure to try to understand on some of the areas around policy and some of the areas around the inner workings and how those parties were, for example, ensuring that their candidates did not break rules around vote buying and abuse of state resources. So in that sense, we tried to get as much of a picture as possible, both here in the National Capital Region and also in the other regions of the country. Did that answer your question? I think it, hopefully.
If anybody wants to add any comments on that, Dennis?
Yeah, talking about political parties, we realize in some countries that political parties is less institutionalized. So challenge like political dynasties or political parties that doesn't have a certain mechanism in recruitment or in the candidacy process. So they just choose anyone that has big money or related to the elite as a candidate, because the goal is to win the election, just to win the election. So it will advantage to the candidate that has money and also relation with the families that already been in the politics. And actually, on the other hand, we talking about political dynasty, we cannot choose from what family we are born, right? But the challenge is, if there is no mechanism within internal political parties, it will not make equal treatment between the member of political parties. For example, if my father is the chairman of the political parties and Riza is just a regular member, my father will pick me as a candidate. There is no equal treatment between me and Riza. So in some recommendation, it stated like at least political parties need certain requirements. For example, you have to be at least 3 years as a member of political parties so you can be nominated. It can be make the political dynasty lesser, in my opinion. Thank you.
I think I wish to add one point related to the experience from the other countries, and I think this issue is everywhere, especially in the Asian context. I think it is high time for us to consider the mechanism, system to select the nominations, the criteria, because no point just to having elections, even if it is free and fair. But if we are unable to select quality, capable politicians to run the country, innovative people to run the country, no point just to have elections and select the peoples. Actually, this is beyond the elections observations. It is high time for civil society to look at it, lobby to the political party to serious about how they are going to select their candidacy, because otherwise voters doesn't have any choice. If they go with the party, whoever in the list, they have to follow, or otherwise they have to serious about only on the candidates. So therefore, I think the civil society need to get together and pressurize and lobby or come up with some mechanism for party to seriously look at the quality representative, quality candidate in an initial stage.
Thank you. Yes. Yes.
You did not make any reference in the machines. I was following up television. I was on Channel 7 yesterday. And at 10 o'clock in the morning, they were reporting as many as 300 machines malfunctioning already. Number one. One is precision or stand and machines. Our friends from Europe, they left already. The Europeans discarded totally the use of machines already for a number of reasons. One, lack of transparency. Two, the people don't trust the machines yet. Three, they are afraid of the accuracy of the count of the machines. So, one of the machines. The second item I have observed is, other than the machines, well, anyway, and the machines, I think the other political parties. There are no political parties in the Philippines. Yes, in the sense of what a political party ought to be. So there is no unpolitical parties in the Philippines, but
Presented the election. Just to reiterate our main findings there is that probably two, because the main reason that the Philippines has procured new machines, of course, is to improve transparency and to increase the confidence of the public because of the 2022 issue. And we have highlighted the underutilization of the enhanced transparency features of the automated counting machines. Number one, since during voter information campaign, ACM demonstration, COMELEC has been highlighting that the voter has this privilege and the right to review the front of the ballot by 15 seconds and the other one by 5 seconds. So it has been underutilized. Sometimes it was bypassed. Observers were able to monitor that some are not actually doing ballot review verification. And at the same time, actually some EBs are bypassing it. So it actually reflected the kind and quality of the training of the poll workers, because giving justice to the transparency feature that the automated counting machines have. So it should have been used more during election day. Second, with regard to the QR code in the VVPAT receipt, during the closing and the transmission stage, we are actually waiting for the poll workers to utilize the ballot verification voting, and at the same time asking our members also to talk to the voters outside the country, but it is not part of the monitoring that we did for this mission. Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, we did expect a better turnout this time, but it is unexpectedly low. So maybe there could be some transparency issues because we thought since it's online, so more it's like easier for people to vote. But I think this is something which we'll have to ponder more and analyze more. Yes, thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Casey. I'm a reporter from Rappler. You noted that you went to 11 regions to monitor. Just for my information, what were the 11 regions and what were your, I guess, standards? Why you chose them? That's my first question.
I'm bad with the names.
No, okay, I will answer. Can I use the microphone? Yeah. Okay, the 11 regions. It's number one is Cordillera Administrative Region. We covered Baguio. In Ilocos region, we covered Vigan and Batak. In Region 2, we covered Tuguegarao. Region 4A, we covered Cavite, Laguna, and Batangas. Region 5, we covered Sorsogon, Legazpi, and Naga. Region 6, we went to Iloilo, Rojas, and Bacolod. Region 7, we were in Cebu and Bohol. Region 8, in Tacloban, Leyte. Region 9, we have covered Zamboanga. Region 10, we went to Davao. Region 11, let me check. I'm good in geography. Region 11, Region 11 is, Region 12, we have covered Soxargen, General Santos, and Sarangani. And in the BARM region, including Cotabato City and Maguindanao del Norte. Actually, the choice of having those regions and cities and municipalities, we have covered both urban and rural, and at the same time checking on the electoral competitiveness and aligning it with the key areas of focus, because the key areas of focus actually is with regard to quality of electoral competition, inclusion, new voting technology, and some areas are vote-rich areas. So that are the main considerations with regard to the methodology.
Okay, thank you.
And of course, I forgot National Capital Region. Actually, with the National Capital Region, we focused in 5, where we find that there's electoral competition. That's Caloocan, Makati, Marikina, Manila, and Pasig. Yeah, that's it.
And just to add a little more on the So just to add a little more on the methodological front, we used both qualitative and quantitative methods. So our observers reached out to a wide range of stakeholders, including EMBs, including the local CSOs, including the stakeholders like voters, including the vulnerable sectors, to understand the various dimensions of the issues. And like Brisa explained, that definitely aligned with our key focus areas. And we also made use of Kobo tool, where they submitted the information live. So they were deployed in like more than 30 cities across these 11 regions. So they spent like around 3 days in each city, and that includes the adjoining regions, both rural and urban. And they submitted detailed reports or Kobo forms to us, so that our analysts can regularly look into the data as well. For election day also, we had separate forms for the opening procedure, for the election like the voting procedure throughout the day, and for the closing and transmission of results. So that's how the methodology goes. Sorry, I couldn't answer the first part because I'm not good with pronunciations of the names of your cities. Still just 21 days old in Philippines.
Okay, thank you though. So my second question is, I think, for Jake, but everybody else can chime in and give their thoughts. But can you elaborate more on your observation that you saw apathy among voters in localities that had uncontested candidates and entrenched political families? Because I just wanted to somehow reconcile that with the high voter turnout. So what were the conversations like in these areas?
Sure. Yeah, I think it is working. Yeah, as I mentioned, I think it is important to make that distinction between high voter turnout and apathy, and it's, I think, a fairly unique context in that example, in that instance, or in that sense, because of course in some other countries you would perhaps expect that within an area that is uncontested that you would see a lower voter turnout. So I'm speaking more of from what our observers saw from speaking to voters on the ground, a resignation of how entrenched that political power is. And when asked about what kind of campaign, what kind of issues they cared about, what kind of issues voters cared about, and how those matched up to the candidates in that area, there was that disconnect because the voters, for example, I mean, I can't quote from specific voters here now, but would give the sense that this person is going to win anyway. Of course, we will come up and turn out to vote, but we know the system is not going to change. And in many centers, people are looking, because of the shorter electoral timeline of the Philippines in terms of a 3-year timeline, looking not just to the 2028 elections, but to the 2031 elections. And in that sense, voters and some other actors we spoke to, are seeing this as part of a process. So in terms of the apathy, it's more to do with this particular election and the resignation, I suppose, of the status quo, despite us seeing, some good observations and some good examples of people who are making active steps to change that.
Yes, thank you, Jake. I am reminded of the time limit as well. I think we just have a couple of minutes more. So maybe one last question, and we'll maybe prioritize media for that as well. And of course, we can continue with this discussion, later.
Thank you, Rana, Jake, Chair, Yustija, and Brisa for the presentations. Just a quick question. I think I know that right before election day, we heard the issue about access to the polling places. Did that at all impede your observation?
They're all looking at me. To be honest, it did not. I can answer in 2 hats. Of course, it affected us. Supposedly, of course, it should have not been a problem. But we respected the decision of the COMELEC because we received a notice that we cannot, or we can just enter the premises of the voting center because historically, since ANFREL has observed 2010, 2016, 19, 22, 22 elections, it was not a problem to us entering the polling precincts. But of course, we respected the framework and the decision of the COMELEC to allow us access on the premises of the voting centers. But we were able to enter during the closing and transmission because it was allowed. So we were able to personally see the transmission. But yeah, actually, we have recognized that limitation ever since because that's in the Omnibus Election Code, and there are prioritization when it comes to the persons who are allowed to enter inside. But that is something that can be addressed with proper coordination with local stakeholders, and at the same time, local strengthening the engagement with local COMELEC officials. Thank you.
Thank you. That's it. Okay, one last question. Yes.
Hi, good morning. My name is Joseph Marzan. I'm from Daily Guardian. I just wanted to ask, because we have reports coming from our our headquarters in Iloilo, where some voters were actually being stopped at the entrance of the schools where the polling precincts were because they were holding sample ballots that were given to them of course by those hired by the parties. Were there also observations of that in other places where you were doing observations?
You want to answer?
I can add, and then maybe others can come in, that so we observed here in NCR and also in the regions numerous instances of people handing out pre-filled ballots, of course, of campaign materials, and part of the campaign period that we noticed is also things like posters that were technically in violations of the Fair Elections Act. And directly outside polling stations on election day, we did notice, and even in some polling precincts, notices pictures of candidates and numbers scattered on the floor. In terms of your specific question on whether we observed voters being turned away, I'd have to go through the data on that, but it's noted and for something for us to look into as well, possibly.
But I think they might be just isolated incidences. It was not something that we largely observed, or like it is not something which kind of disturbed or intervened with the process in any way.
Yeah, but because I'm getting this from formal complaints that were actually filed with the COMELEC by voters themselves, actually. So I was wondering if there were other cases in other areas of the country.
We did not receive the same reports in other areas. Yeah. But we did observe unlawful electioneering, that kind of election offense. Just like Jake mentioned, there were still supporters campaigning for their candidates, but we did not receive that kind of report that voters were not allowed to enter.
Yes, and we are of course limited by our own observation. So we did manage to cover around 270 polling precincts on the election day, but this is not something that ANFREL observed so far. Yes.
And on, if I can still ask one more question, on specific instances of vote buying, were voters able to share what kinds of how they were able to receive money from political operatives?
I think it has become quite advanced, but Nines can take that.
Yeah, in areas that we are observed that there is some vote buying activities. For example, voters get money around 1,000 pesos from the campaign team candidate, and not only money, but also, for example, like free food or other stuff, good stuff during the rally and campaign process. But we, actually, in some our observation area, there's like announcement that if you saw practice of vote buying, you can report to this number. But we still cannot verify who is this that responsible with this number, because it's not formally from the COMELEC.
And I think this is something sometimes which is also very difficult to keep the track of. And I think it's also the responsibility of citizens, so that they also keep a watch on each other, because I think they are the ones who are the pillars of democracy, like the most important parts. So it is something which should come ideally from the citizens as well. And we also observe that, this is also something which maybe over the time period, it has become like, new normal, or like some voters, they have also normalized this. Yes, but obviously this is something which is against the fairness or the right practices. So I would close this session now. Firstly, I would like to thank all the panelists for this engaging discussion. So huge round of applause for them. And then I would also like to extend our thanks and gratitude to the diplomatic community, development partners, for their constant support throughout this mission and also the future and past activities of ANFREL. Then, of course, civil society partners, especially ANFREL's members, Lente, PPCRV, you can raise your hands. Yes, Lente, PPCRV, and ANFREL. So we are very grateful because your guidance and your support throughout this mission has been very helpful. And then, of course, media. Thank you so much for taking out time for this and participating in this event. And I would also like to thank our mission management team. Some of them are already here. So ANFREL is really fortunate to have such a dedicated and hardworking team, and all our mission coordinators, national coordinators, as well as the assistants, LTO assistants, EA assistants, and the entire support staff. So thank you so much. And then, of course, our LTOs, our short-term observers who are not here right now, but huge round of applause for them also. They had gone without meals, like not just on the election day, but many other days as well. So really appreciate their efforts and dedication. And then, of course, Filipino voters, all the stakeholders that we reached out to during our observation mission, all the interviewees, and the rest of the contributors to the mission. So thank you so much. I would like to request my colleague John, who's the Senior Program Officer for Outreach and Communication at ANFREL, and he also served as the Mission Coordinator for Media Relations and Communications for this mission. So he is going to moderate the next session. So over to you now, John. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Rana. No? I don't know if you've noticed, I've been stressed with a lot of technical difficulties today, but I hope people stick around for the second part of the discussion. Thank you to our supporters. No, yes. I would like to invite our speakers for this part of the session. Attorney Ona Caritos, the Executive Director of GMA Network for Truthful Elections. Mr. Jude Liao, Executive Director of the Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible Voting, or PPCRV. And shots. I am actually also not much prepared. Please, ma'am, take a seat on here on the stage. I'm not much prepared, so please forgive me. But I wanted to say first, before the opening spiel that was given to me, that this is a full circle moment for us. I don't know if you've been following our small podcast series on our social media pages. It's called the Election Observer Podcast, where we talk to different electoral stakeholders, particularly civil society organizations, of course, election observer groups that are working in the Asian region. And for our second episode, after our pilot episode, it has gone a couple of months before we started on the next few episodes. We resumed the podcast with a discussion with the same group of people here on this stage to discuss election campaigning in the Philippines at the start of the election campaign period here in the country. So this is a full circle moment for us because we're here now after the elections discussing what they have observed in this election. No? So for my question, of course, how are you guys? No, no. I wanted to ask first. No, what are the? I know it's the initial. It's just been like a few days after the elections, but from
It feels like yesterday.
yes, I know. But from the campaign period and even before the campaign period, no, up to this point, what are your key findings or observations during the 2025 elections? And were there new challenges or improvements worth highlighting in this election? Who would like to go first? Maybe we start with Ma'am Cora.
First, I'd like to thank ANFREL and the men and women in the team for spending time here. It means a lot. Your presence means a lot in lending integrity to the process of our election in an era where everyone is complaining about the narrowing democratic space in Asian countries. The presence of international observers in our exercise, even if it's a midterm election, and your very objective observation counts a lot. So thank you very much. Now, you were, like Dami, I easily forget questions. What were you asking us?
Yes, ma'am. My question was, I guess from the moment that we had even during the election period, all throughout the election period, what were your key findings or observations during these elections, and were there new challenges or improvements worth highlighting?
Okay. I am very glad to note that the observation of NAMFREL pretty much aligns to the observation of the Asian Network for Free Elections with regards to the openness, inclusiveness, measures to promote transparency, and the performance of the automated counting machines. If you are looking at the same observation points and you have basically the same methodology and you are trained to look objectively, then you will more or less have a convergence of observation. So basically, we appreciate the effort of the election COMELEC, of the COMELEC in instituting innovative measures, no, to address critical problems in this election. So they have formed task forces and study groups to address specific questions and the now questions, specifically the vote buying. So they have a task force on vote buying. There's a task force on disinformation and various other task forces that address specific concerns. So we appreciate the openness and inclusivity. And number two, starting in January, COMELEC has been conducting stakeholders meeting and updating not only the election management bodies, but the media and other concerned parties, including the political parties, I think, updating them on the developments, the preparations. So we appreciate that. Now, the challenges that come in are things that I think were not anticipated. So these are challenges that will come in. And the technology is a work in progress. There will always be hiccups, especially that we engage another provider this time. So these problems, with an open mind, assuming that there's an open mind, can be addressed, because I am sure that COMELEC will institute measures to address the specific technical problems coming in. And I agree that another innovation is the extension of the voting period to include, to give a specific time to special sectors like us to be able to vote, which means they work practically more than 14 hours, the election body, the electoral board. So people have been hardworking. If there are questions, it's not because of the before mindset that things have been manipulated. This time, it's the natural to cheat, specifically. This time, the hiccups are because of unexpected events. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So how am I?
How are you?
That was the first question, right? So TPCRV, we just ended our 24-hour operation since Monday, last night. So I still feel like a zombie at this point. We will continue our operations for the audit of the transmission from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. So I was able to sleep for a bit last night. But thank you again to ANFREL and to our partners, Lente and NAMFREL, for all the work and partnership that we've been doing for the elections. In terms of our observation, before elections, from the campaign period to now, I concur with ANFREL and NAMFREL's observations on the transparency and innovations introduced by COMELEC, and I won't repeat them anymore. I would just like to add as well the addition of malls as voting centers. It helped a lot, especially with the heat. For those who are on the ground, you experienced yourselves how hot it is and it was in voting centers. So those who voted in malls were blessed individuals and voters. And then second, on the early voting hours, it was very much welcome, a welcome development for vulnerable sectors. However, it's good to note that this increased the number of hours for teachers and poll watchers as well. Yes, it only increased by 2 hours before the start, but that also means an earlier start for opening procedures and a later closing as well. Many of our volunteers and teachers spent almost 20 hours at voting centers. And by the close of elections and by the time they were giving out election returns, you could only imagine the hot-headedness of people on the ground, given the heat and the long hours of work for everyone as well. And the last I would like to add on the innovations would be the and transparency. Aside from the regular briefings, the regular invitations as well to many of the activities of the Commission, as well as the live-streamed activities of COMELEC, which allowed more participation and observation of these activities. Then on election day, as mentioned, the new system brought about, of course, new challenges and new hiccups on the machine side and the transmission side. For us in PPCRV in particular, we noted and already brought to light the delay in access to the results after voting. So we only were able to receive the first file at around 8:40 p.m. on election night. And we flagged that right away together with the media and ANFREL. Aside from that, the gap between the COMELEC server and the transparency server, COMELEC was at already around 79%. We were only at around 60% in terms of results. So we questioned that. And COMELEC swiftly responded that by the next morning, we got the balance of that gap. Although we're still waiting for an official response and explanation for these things. And the last that we noted on these hiccups would be since there was a new provider for transmission and the machines, there were changes in file formats, in processes, in the technology side, which of course changed a lot of things as well in terms of how we operate as CSPOs, CSOs, and in terms of how we do the audits as well. And I'll speak to that more later.
I just have a comment with Jude's statement that he feels like a zombie. It's good that you feel like a zombie as long as we don't look like zombies. So good morning. Exchange na. Let me exchange. I concur with all the observations and statements made by ANFREL, by NAMFREL, PPCRV, but let me just highlight in this campaign period and during this election period, what was notable was the hundreds of show cause orders issued by our Commission on Elections against election law violators. And this is the first time actually that we saw our election management body issue out hundreds of show cause orders. So we welcome this issuance of show cause orders, but we are still we would still monitor what would happen to these hundreds of show cause orders, because it would be remiss on the part of COMELEC if nothing would happen as to these hundreds of show cause orders, because if nothing would happen, candidates and their supporters would just feel more emboldened to commit election law violations this coming 2028 or 3 years from now. So I would like to highlight that that's one of the more notable innovations made by COMELEC to fight impunity or the lack of accountability in our elections. But John, let me ask for your consent, because I would be remiss if I prepared something as to our observations during election day. Is it okay if I go through our election day observations?
Okay, I thought you wanted to play my rap video, but
No, not yet. Because I love ANFREL, I prepared a short, a short summary of what we observed last Monday. So, good day. We're still in the process of collating our volunteers' reports. For the purpose of this briefing, I will be highlighting notable incidents, observations that we got from our volunteers and public reports. First observation, there was that expectation of screen review after the voters inserted the ballots. It was clear to all of us during the demonstrations of COMELEC that screen review would not be enabled on election day. Unfortunately, what COMELEC did not do was to remove that provision in the general instructions on voting, counting, and transmission. So for future elections, I think COMELEC should remove provisions that they would not implement so that it would not be a cause of confusion for stakeholders, especially political parties and their watchers. Second major observations, it's the familiarity of our electoral board members as to election day procedure. For example, the challenge using the VVPAT, we see a number of videos circulating in Meta as to the different ways that our electoral board members accepted the challenges as to the VVPAT. But as we know, according to the general instructions, there is a provided instruction or there is a provided procedure. So it shows that maybe in the next election, COMELEC should zero in on the remedies, on the frequently experienced challenges by our electoral board members. Second observation, as to the lack of familiarity, we receive a number of reports as to the use of the PPP or the priority polling place. We all know that the PPP is optional, but in some voting centers all over the Philippines, the support staff of the PPP and the aid made it mandatory for senior citizens, for persons with disability, and pregnant women to vote in the PPP. That's why we saw long queues on election day, because the support staff of the PPP were just mandating certain sectors in the voting center to vote in the PPP instead of giving them the option to go to their regular polling stations. Third observation, this is familiar to all of us. Election offenses still abound. Last Monday, the presence of unauthorized people inside the polling stations like barangay or village officials, illegal assisters. We saw in an IP community in Bulacan that the assisters were really the ones voting for the indigenous people voter, and that should not be allowed, especially that it was in an accessible voting center. It was an accommodation made by COMELEC to make elections more accessible, inclusive to IP voters. But unfortunately, that happened. The watchers became illegal assisters. Of course, there's reports of vote buying and unlawful electioneering. Last two observations, John, I'm sorry. Fourth observation is most of the election day problems could have been avoided if the mock election conditions were likened to election day conditions. To our friends from the different embassies and consulates, COMELEC conducted several mock elections, but unfortunately, the conditions in these mock elections were not likened to election day conditions. So there were just 10, 50 voters. The problem with the marker, because the marker was one of the major concerns on election day, that it blotted so easily, that it ran out of easily. That could have been avoided if COMELEC, through the mock elections, actually let 900 voters use that marker. They could have seen, we will have a problem with the markers, with the thin ballot papers. So that could have been avoided if the mock elections conducted by COMELEC be likened to election day conditions and not just, it's a 2-hour compliant procedure before elections. And the last observation, disinformation election day was present. But COMELEC this time, they had a good communication strategy. They issued out bulletins, they had press conferences every hour. So the information or the disinformation that we saw on election day was immediately debunked by COMELEC just to stop the rumor and just to stop the paranoia of certain groups or certain voters across the country. So those are our main observations last election day. Thank you, John.
Thank you. My next question would be, if you were able to monitor these things, what were the common electoral offenses or violations you encountered this year? Was it the same as the previous elections, or are there some improvements in this election in terms of addressing electoral offenses? And how did your teams respond or escalate these problems? Maybe we start with you, Jude, first.
In terms of election offenses, vote buying was still very much reported, both in our hotline and by our coordinators. In terms of improvement, we can't say for sure as it's too early since we're still collating these results and these reports. But one thing that was good was at our command center in PLDT Sampaloc, we had COMELEC representatives headed by Director Michelle Frances Paredes and her team to escalate concerns directly to COMELEC. So as the reports were coming in, they would send them to COMELEC's headquarters right away, and resolutions would come within 5 to 10 minutes. We'd call back and then inform voters or volunteers who called about these issues and concerns. Another concern or election offense that we usually hear about would be the presence of, as Attorney Ona mentioned, the presence of individuals who are not supposed to be in polling centers or even nearby, because many of them, even if they're not inside anymore, as they exit, they put up a small tent right outside, and that's where they station to give out sample ballots. Some report giving out IDs, and in exchange for something, whatever that something could be. These are reports we're still verifying at the moment. And we did hear swift action on some of them, but there were still some reports that were in action because in discussion with COMELEC, it was a question of who will tell these people what to do or what not to do. For some of them, they were saying PPCRV, since we reported, should inform them that they shouldn't be there. But that's not our role. We are citizens' arms who help watch the polls. So it should be the election officer or the DESO who's on the ground to inform these individuals of what they should and should not be doing.
Oh, now we go to this way again.
I think just like what I mentioned earlier, we really like the Committee on Contrabigay 2.0 headed by Commissioner Maceda because of their efforts to fight not only vote buying but also abuse of state resources. Because ASR is also a big problem like vote buying, but it's not talked about. It's not that talked about. If you take a look at our elections 3 years ago, if you Google ASR, you will not see any mention of ASR in Philippine elections. But now, ASR is being talked about. So we really like that effort of our Commission on Elections led by Commissioner Maceda to fight vote buying and also abuse of state resources. But what we notice is there's an interagency task force or committee where the government agencies, the civil society partners of Committee on Contrabigay meet every month or every 2 months to give updates. And in the last update, unfortunately, if you take a look at the number of partners of the Committee on Contrabigay, most of them had no updates. It was only us who gave updates on the number of reports that we got, 100, on vote buying and abuse of state resources. So if you compare a small NGO, a small election monitoring organization, getting 100 reports to government agencies like the PNP, DICT, and their updates that they haven't gotten any reports on vote buying, and that was, I think, a few weeks before election day. So I think for the preparation for the 2028 elections, the Committee on Contrabigay should immediately reactivate itself for the 2028 so that these government agencies would be more, more involved in the process of monitoring and fighting vote buying and abuse of state resources.
Same. Basically, two big problems. One is, it seems that the chaos attending the election day in various poly centers, very disorderly. And we appear to be okay with it. In other words, we go through, one of my friends waited for 3 hours to be able to vote. And it was, if the voting center was comfortable, it would have been okay. But given the very, given our very hot weather, then it's almost a hygienic issue. So I think something has to be done. I understand that the principal, there's a voting center manager, and I don't know where they are. So the voting center manager has to be held accountable for organizing. Number two, in fairness, there are lesser problems of disenfranchised voters. Not many people not very many people complained about getting lost or not finding themselves not finding their names in the voting center or being directed to another voting center. So in fairness, I think the list of voters has been improved. The one thing that worries us is the normalization of big time cheating, big time lack of choice for the voters. If our STOs leave the Philippines, the one Filipino word they learned is ayuda. I was listening to the reports yesterday and everyone was saying the ayuda was meant this way, the ayuda. I said, ayuda is a very deep word. Where did they get it? It turned out that it's a common thing happening in their places. The ayuda came this way. The ayuda did not come late. The ayuda was unfairly distributed. The ayuda came from there. They know the word ayuda, and which is the abuse of state resources. The akap, these 4 syllables, yakap, whatever, has been institutionalized, and they know that how it is distributed, and the resources come from LGU officials. And the number 2 is, it seems that we have been immune to having the same people with the same surnames fighting it out for the various positions. So you have daddy and mommy and oldest son and sister-in-law and brother-in-law and father having the same names in the slate. So we have lost the political party system. We have to regain that. I am of the age that I just know the Liberal Party and the Nationalista Party, and they have manner of recruitment. There's a manner of nomination to field their nominees. Now they invent political parties several legal months before the election, and so I do not know anymore the political parties. I just know that there is political party of this person and the political party of this person. But we have lost the political party system that has, well, of course, it's a political initiative, not COMELEC's, but the worrisome thing is that we are limiting the choices for the voters. So even if even if we introduce technologies and innovations in elections, if you select from the same pool, then you do not have democracy. That is what is worrisome.
I see. I hope it's not a bleak picture for the Philippines, no, and that there's still somehow hope. Because I wanted to talk about your collaborations now with the Commission on Election. Because I know NAMFREL, PPCRV, and LENTE have been working with our election management body, of course, in their efforts to address issues of related to elections. No? So I wanted to ask how your organizations collaborated with COMELEC and other electoral stakeholders for this election. Maybe we start with you now. This is your mic.
I get confused with the mic. Okay. Thank you, John. I think just like what Ma'am Cora, Jude said earlier, this COMELEC has been the most open and the most engaging COMELEC. I've been in the election space for 5 years already. I've been in the election space for more than a decade already. I can personally say that this is the most open, engaging COMELEC. We work closely with Committee on Contribigay, the Vulnerable Sector Office, as to accessibility of elections for vulnerable sectors. And we're also working closely with the Task Force KKK, or the task force created to fight disinformation and monitor online campaigning during this campaign period. So that's our engagement with the Commission on Elections. But we also work closely with other government agencies like the CHR. CHR is represented today in monitoring the voting of vulnerable sectors. We also work closely with NCDA, NCIP, the government agencies in charge for the vulnerable sectors. And of course, we're working with our partner from the teachers' organizations, Teachers Dignity Coalition, led by Sir Benjo Basas. So we got a number of reports as well from our electoral board members or from the members of TDC who acted as electoral board members last Monday. So that's our partnerships for this election.
How about NAFREL?
Okay, thank you. I reiterate what Brisa said. It's almost like sleeping with the enemy, you know. Before all the previous COMELEC administrations have treated us as watchdogs, very bad watchdogs. But now they have changed the mindset and call us partners. And as in all relationships, sometimes you get satiated. They invite you in the morning for one activity and they invite you in the afternoon for another activity, and you run out of people because we are all volunteers, right? So you do not know how to what do you call this, oblige anymore, because there's so many activities and we have so few, limited time. But however, I'd like to sincerely say that this COMELEC is, not only competent, but kind of sincere in wanting to improve the election system. Some people in the audience will not agree with me. Yes, but I sincerely believe that engaging in the 2025 elections has been very rewarding. There's a confidence. You come away with feeling of confidence that we're doing things right. Okay. With regards, yes, the other. Thank you very much. Was that sent by COMELEC? Sometimes.
No.
No. Okay, thank you. COMELEC involves us in the many task forces, not only in the meetings. So we are involved in the various task forces, and we are involved in the task forces in the various activities to check the integrity of the machine, the technology, and the public relations efforts. But we do not have a and individually the decision of the COMELEC not to pass through the transparency server, but to give access to the to various stakeholders. Well, aside from the constitutionally mandated receivers of the transmission, it opened the servers to NAMFREL, PPCRV, and the media, which shows transparency. So I may be overly saying things about the good things, but of course we mentioned earlier the challenges about crowd management, about the not preparedness of the election officials in the various provinces, and of course we have a regular bureaucracy. In other countries, they do not. Their COMELEC is not as extensive. Their COMELEC is only the commission in the head office, and then they mobilize. They invite members of the bureaucracy during election time. But we have a real bureaucracy from the head office to the municipal level. So the election level, the municipal and city level might stand some improvement. What do you call this? The ones at the provincial level and the regional level might be doing more to improve the operation at the grounds. But with regards to the head office COMELEC, I think they are doing things to invite public confidence in the election system.
Thank you. For PPCRV, in terms of partnerships, our largest partner by far would be our network, the church. So PPCRV is a church-based organization with a Catholic Church in the Philippines, and without that network, we won't be able to field out over 350,000 volunteers nationwide, especially on election day. And we are very much grateful to all these volunteers and the church for lending us this network or being partners with us. Aside from this, in terms of our engagement with COMELEC, I agree with what has been said. And in terms of relationships, I would say it's a healthy relationship with COMELEC now, in terms of a balance between partnering with each other and holding each other accountable. So with the many things that we've said so far, especially on the transmission, the delays, and all of that, we have only received action and no extra complaints or blame for these things. In particular, in terms of our engagement and partnership with COMELEC, we have been very much involved, similar to ANFREL, with the technology side. So we have an IT team headed by Dr. William Yu and Romel Bernardo, who have been hands-on with the local source code review for the new ACM, the new transmission system, and the new the randomization application for the selection of RMA sites. And aside from the IT department or on the tech side, we also have a good working relations with the PMO for the NLE and EBAD, because we also have the voters assistance desks nationwide, and more recently with the Vulnerable Sectors Office.
Okay, we're down to our last two questions, so please bear with us, people. My next question would be, of course, this is something that is always asked to election observer groups. No? After observing elections, after engaging in the process, of course, you come up with your own observations and recommendations to the election management body and other relevant authorities. No, but how do you, as organizations, ensure that these recommendations see the light of day? That's the right question, right? See the light of day, that they do not just exist in a paper, but they actually are being followed through in terms of policy reforms and electoral reforms, for that matter. Ma'am Cora, we start with you.
Okay, I think it's also partly our fault. In the many elections and the many subsequent reports that we have submitted, the same issues come up. And I believe it is the lack of responsiveness. I do not know that the previous COMELECs have ever read our reports. Meaning, I don't refer to this one. This one is, we will see. The word is we will see, because knowing how responsive they are to the concern of the civil society group, we will see if they will respond to our reports. But the three of us have this practice and responsibility to submit our election end report. But from experience, and I was saying, do we even, in the past reports, 2019, 2022, do we even have to submit? Because they don't read. You look at the same recommendation and they are there, still problem. But we will see this time. We are hopeful about this administration, about this election commission. Not administration.
For us, what we learned from the 2022 was, aside from the full-blown report that we publish, which would be a 40-page report usually, we also send letters to specific COMELEC offices on these recommendations. And we make sure that they follow through by meeting with them and try to see which ones they can respond to and which ones we can work on a little bit more. For instance, the labeling of the election returns. Before, they just used to print 9 copies. Now, because of lobbying from PPCRV and ANFREL, they labeled the election returns with copy for the PPCRV, copy for NAMFREL, etc., which we thought would make it easier for the teachers to distribute these copies. However, we've so far received 18,000 election returns in our command center, and it is unfortunate to say that we still receive copies that are not intended for us. In fact, we have copies for the Board of Canvassers, we have copies for the Commission, and many copies for NAMFREL as well. Although these are the same copies of the same election return, it just defeats the whole purpose of labeling these election returns. So it's now a question moving forward. After that initial recommendation of labeling the election returns, we're now looking at the process of putting them into envelopes, releasing them to the parties, because it seems then that it's not just about labeling, but rather also following the procedures set in the general instructions. So that's just one of the many different things that we've seen. And it's a continuing process, which is quite tiresome for for most part, because it's a repetitive process that we have to raise these concerns again and again. In particular, we also released a set of recommendations for the new internet voting system, which I personally don't have at this point because it's with our IT team. But we will release a report on that and a summarized report since it's the first time we did that. So hopefully we get a response. As Ma'am Cora said, we're at a we'll see phase for these elections.
I'm thinking of a joke. To those who know me personally, I'm not really a fan of long reports. And we always say in Lente that we honor the efforts and all the hard work of our volunteers by making sure that all these reports will be transformed to actual reforms. And fortunately, we've worked on a few successful reforms for the past few years, like the passage of the Election Service Reform Act together with Teachers Dignity Coalition, the creation of the Vulnerable Sector Office, the evolution of the Committee on Kontrabigay, the registration of the official online accounts of political parties and candidates. So we're focused on pushing for reform because we feel that it's our work now and it's our responsibility to honor all the hard work of our volunteers by making sure that all these efforts, all these reports will be transformed into actual reforms, whether before our Congress, our Parliament, or before our election management body, the Commission on Elections. So that's our effort, or that's our focus after these elections, to continue with the reforms that were not that successful before these elections and to push for new reforms, hopefully in time for the 2020 presidential elections.
Lastly, it's not new to us about the issues related to some election observer groups in terms of access. I just wanted to ask for my last question. Are there gaps in the legal framework that limit the work of election observers in the Philippines? And how do you think we should address it? Is there like a provision for election observers in the Philippines? Okay, then we start with you.
You should start with the lawyer.
With the lawyer.
Yes. With the good lawyer. We're just a few in the room, don't worry. So we have rules on accreditation. But unlike NAMFREL and PBCRV, Lente is not accredited. We've never had, the last time we had accreditation was 15 years ago. But despite the lack of accreditation, we managed to get the work done. We managed to get the observation done. So it's not really, you don't have to get that accreditation. You just need to be more creative. And as we all know, you can really observe even outside of the classroom. But in some areas, you are allowed to go inside as long as you get the permission of the electoral board members and you introduce your purpose why you're observing in the first place. So I think, yes, there is a framework as to accreditation, but the framework doesn't really limit observers like us who don't have accreditation. So I don't know what's the problem with other,
No more mic for Attorney Ona today. Thank you, Attorney Ona. I'm not a lawyer, so I won't go into the legal aspect of access. Instead, I'll go into the practical and the on-the-ground access for us. Accreditation for PPCRV is very important because it's one of the main things that teachers look for to allow entry for our poll watchers, to allow access, and to allow to be given the pre-transmission election returns. However, despite this accreditation that we get from the Commission, we still are not given, as I mentioned, the right pre-transmission election return, or at times, we have received many reports, the actual election returns, because as they say, some teachers would say, the Electoral Board would say, yes, you're accredited with that piece of paper, but I was never informed of that accreditation. And it's so unfortunate that despite the apparent accreditation and the labeling of the election return, they would still say that we are not we cannot get that election return that has been labeled for PPCRV. So aside from the legal aspect of it, there's as I mentioned, the procedural and the on-the-ground work that has to be followed through as well. Because even if we have these rules and instructions, we also have to look at how these rules and instructions are being followed and done on the ground. And for PPCRV in particular, that's very important because these pre-transmission election returns are what we use for the auditing of the transmitted vote. So as I mentioned, our volunteers are still flocking to PLDT Sampaloc, our command center, to compare the printed election returns, which are pre-transmission election returns, with the transmitted vote from the server, so that we'll get to see if there was any manipulation of the vote as it was transmitted to the server. So that's how important it is. Hence our renewed call to hopefully push and ensure that teachers or electoral boards release the pre-transmission ERs to our volunteers on the ground.
Okay. This is the last question you
Yes,
said.
ma'am.
Okay. Basically, the laws have to be codified and updated because the Omnibus Election Law 1985 is very limited. And so there are new developments that require that this be changed or codified or amended. And what is frustrating is that the three of us, these election bodies, are always asked to present position papers, are invited in the oversight committees to update and to update these laws. And we present, you spend hours trying to contribute something, and then it does not get passed. And so this COMELEC has to draft resolutions to be able to do something. It's like patchwork, you just patch the situation, but a real comprehensive and updated and relevant election law has to be passed. But unfortunately, you have a Senate which was headed by a non-lawyer. Is she a lawyer? The sister? She's a law graduate. So she just wanted her face. Well, no, don't say that. Okay.
No more mic for you.
The Catholic vote doesn't want me to. Okay. So that's it. So we need the law. We need to update our law so that we will have. Okay. But before I end, I want to say that this is not to congratulate us. The PPCRV did a magnanimous task of manning the voters' assistance desk, VAD. They were all there. And I cannot imagine if the PPCRV voters' assistance desk wasn't there. There will be more chaos. Okay. And I'd like to commend Lente for guiding or helping assistance the COMELEC in the legal in updating some election matter electoral law matters, COMELEC. But it's not to say that the COMELEC is lacking, because most of the commissioners and most of the down to the election officers are lawyers, but they need an outsider an outsider to be able to provide inputs. And we always try to assist COMELEC in technological matters. So it's a team working there. And finally, COMELEC asks us for help, and it's very important. Ask us for help instead of being suspicious of our motives. So we have a good thing going there, like as in a love story.
Of course, we wanted to think of NAMFREL, PPCRV, and Lente for the hard work that they've been doing. And we are very much proud that they are ANFREL members. So I think they deserve a huge round of applause. Thank you, Ma'am Cora. Thank you, Jude. Thank you, Attorney Ona, for joining us this morning. And that has been the episode of the Election Observer. No. that has been this morning's program on the release of ANFREL's interim report on its international election observation mission to the 2025 Philippine national and local elections, and of course, a very important exchange with our important partners here in the Philippines. Please visit our website, www.anfrel.org, for the full report. What I will announce? Yes. I was told to announce that there will be a memorandum of agreement signing this afternoon between the Asian Network for Free Elections and the Commission on Election for the co-hosting of the 7th Asian Electoral Stakeholder Forum here in the Philippines next year, 2026. So please look out for that this afternoon. Maraming salamat po again. Maraming salamat po ulit. Maraming salamat. Magandang umaga. Yes. Thank you, Araneta.